Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Game with No Rules by Michael Atamanov, translated by Andrew Schmidt, narrated by Neil Hellegers. Balance of Power. "How is she?" I asked Maya as she entered the small dining hall. I was sure that the truth seeker would be able to guess who I was asking about, but if she didn't, she could always read it from my thoughts. I noticed that my wife was looking remarkably poorly rested today. Even the expensive cosmetics and clothing she wore were unable to distract from the black circles under her eyes, drooping in exhaustion. Might that have been her age showing? Obviously, it was difficult to maintain the appearance of a young woman at her... How many years had Maya racked up at this point? 130? 150? 200? All right, Jorg, that's enough. The beautiful redhead rushed to intervene, giving yet another confirmation that she read my mind all the time without a second thought. I get the message. I'll make sure I don't come to breakfast again without getting myself together first. It's just that I really am tired. I've never had an easy time talking with the Dark Mother, and our last conversation just sucked all the life force out of me. How is she? I asked, repeating my initial question. The Dark Mother is slowly fading, Jorg. Her decrepit body, racked with diseases of old age, is just giving up. She's bedridden and no longer even tries to stand. But she remains the strongest truth seeker in the galaxy, and could still use her mind to crush the skull of any person like a soft-boiled egg. After her feud with the Emperor, the Dark Mother lost her source of power and is now living on reserves. Whether they will last long is something neither I nor she knows. I'll admit, I still haven't figured out why the Dark Mother wanted to talk with me long distance. We didn't talk about what happened to her, nor did we discuss the Emperor. We didn't even get close to touching on political issues. It was simply a conversation with a frail old lady, mortally exhausted after a very long life. However, after that half-hour conversation, I feel like a squeezed lemon. I have the sensation that I just took an important exam, and it looks very much like I failed. Maya went silent, giving me the chance to think over her words. I pointed my spouse to her usual seat at the dining table, but Maya didn't sit down, instead heading toward a large mirror on the wall. It looked like the thoughts she'd overheard about her age showing had stung, and she now wanted to make sure they weren't true. But I was still thinking seriously over Maya's words. The Dark Mother had never been inclined to idle chatter. In fact, the most powerful of the truth seekers was known to speak quite rarely. But before, each of her words were akin to a command, because everyone understood that the ruler of the Empire spoke through her lips. That all changed 3 months ago. I was one of the few who knew the true facts of the conflict between the Emperor and the Dark Mother. For the rest of the Empire, what happened was a real shock. It all started with a video clip depicting the Emperor's guard ruthlessly shooting down my bodyguards and cousin, Duchess Katerina Tanunatari, while the normally tranquil Dark Mother screamed rabidly for my head. The video of the utterly unprovoked attack on Crown Prince Jorg Royal Inoki Tun Mesfel, the hero of the war with the aliens, ruler of the Unitary state, loyal subject to the Empire, and one of the most popular military commanders, caused a real stir, rattling society's faith in the Emperor's infallibility. Many leading aristocrats and politicians expressed a negative opinion of that event, including the heads of the blue, purple, and green great houses, as well as representatives of the Imperial Joint Chiefs of Staff. So the harsh ultimatum I issued in response was perceived by the majority of Imperial citizens as justified. But what happened after that was thought by many to be impossible, and caught even me quite by surprise. Emperor August Royal Tol Tanakad backpedaled and begged an official apology for the attack on the Unitari embassy, agreeing to also pay me $5 billion in compensation for the murder of my diplomats and destruction of my yacht, Queen of Sin. The Emperor claimed the Dark Mother had been the impetus for the bloodbath in the Silver Palace, explaining that her treachery was rooted in a very old panic dread of non-human races, which gave her an incorrect view of the situation. August claimed to have been an unwilling victim, blindly following the Dark Mother's reasoning, which he'd grown accustomed to trusting over their 3 long centuries together. In his address to the people, the Emperor announced that he had dismissed the Dark Mother with honors, while his new truth-seeker would be Krista, who had worked until that point for the ruler of the Blue House, Duchess Ovella Royal Stockton Moreau. To be honest, I had never believed in the sincerity of the Emperor's regret. Not 3 months ago, and certainly not now. It was just that August Royal Akkad was not expecting to come up against such a severe reaction from society, and had certainly not foreseen that I would manage to avoid arrest and slip away from the Silver Palace. Confronted with a difficult dilemma, either have at least the Unitari State and Greenhouse leave the Empire, or admit guilt, August chose a third option. Try to cordon himself off by using the Dark Mother as a scapegoat. For a time, that really did dampen the anger in the Empire, although the great house's trust in the throne world never returned to its former level. For my part, I was immediately suspicious when I asked to be compensated in ships and parts instead of money, and the throne world refused. I even made another offer, which wouldn't have cost the throne world a single credit, but would have affirmed the course to reconciliation. I asked to have my son Jorg Jr. named an official Imperial Crown Prince, but, once again, the Emperor said no. Then, when my specialist tried to order heavy laser cannons and warp drives from manufacturing facilities in the Imperial Core for the new battleships and assault cruisers, they were refused everywhere without explanation. They all spoke to a restriction on selling high-tech military equipment to the Unitari State that, while not officially declared, did still exist de facto. Of course, such moves by the throne world did nothing to ease tensions. Obviously, given that, there could be no discussion of sending my daughter Likana back to her preparatory school in the throne world. So both Crown Princess Likana Royal Jorg Tun Unitari and her closest friend, Crown Princess Natalie Royal Cruz Tun Unitari, had remained in Unitari space. By the way, as for Likana, my daughter had come to breakfast wearing a set of warm pajamas adorned with silly cartoon characters and a pair of huge fluffy slippers on her bare feet. I wanted to note to the young princess that girls of her age were supposed to get dressed for the day before coming to breakfast, but the words got stuck in my throat, because Princess Astra came into the small dining hall right after Lika in a near-identical getup. Poofy white pajamas with pink frogs and little gray donkeys, plush slippers gaping up with huge googly eyes, and a hood on her head with long bunny ears. "Hi, Dad," said Lika, giving me a quick peck on the cheek and sitting cross-legged on a high chair. "Have you heard the news? Astra is now owner of the studio that produces the cartoon Jean the Star Traveler. Remember a year and a half ago when we invested the money she got from her painting The Last Day of Vierde into making a new season of the adventures of Jean the Space Frog? Well, it was actually enough for a whole 10 new seasons, and they're amazing. The money we made from that was enough to buy a controlling share in the studio." I looked at Astra, smiling happily with her snow-white teeth. Her light-colored wavy hair was still messy after waking up, and her eyes were sparkling in childlike wonder. Now, the princess was happy and proud of herself, so I figured I shouldn't make a comment about her appearance in this moment of triumph. Astra was basically a fully grown lady, the doting mother of a strong and healthy boy of 7 months. She had received an excellent education and knew all the subtleties of courtly etiquette. But all the same, I just couldn't bring myself to treat her like an adult. Her personality had a bizarre combination of brilliance, naivete, and simplicity. And the princess was not acting or playing either. She really did live in her own special little world where, if something was boring or didn't concern her directly, it simply didn't exist. I suspect that Astra didn't even know about my problems with the Emperor, because it was just political news. It didn't affect her, so she didn't care. 3 months ago, in order to avoid potential issues with Astra holding the title of princess, which, after the destruction of Verde, was no longer strictly accurate, I had made Astra a swarm princess and assigned her a holding in the Uyak system. And instead of forming a group of economic, design, and construction advisors, the first thing Astra did in her role of ruler was to start learning the Assaic language. Although the language of the insects was considered rather simple due to its low number of words and grammar rules, the human throat was not anatomically adapted to pronouncing a significant portion of the high-frequency sounds it employed. All the same, that didn't stop Astra, despite all the warnings. In principle, I didn't see anything wrong with the ruler of the star system wanting to understand her subjects directly without a translator. But Astra wanted more. Just a month later, considering her language proficiency adequate, the princess headed out on her own to the Intergalactic Communications Center on my flagship, Joan the Fatty, and demanded that the officers provide her a direct line to the Uyak star system. At that time, I was in Sector 9, busy with some major training exercises for my space fleet, so I didn't hear about my favorite's little adventure until the news came out. Bionica and Phobos, struggling with Princess Astra's horrifying accent, translated my favorite speech for me. To be honest, I buried my face in my hands when I heard it, just incapable of listening to the drivel Astra was issuing from the platform. My favorite was suggesting the planet Uyak 4 be turned into a heaven of comfort, and also the very safest place in the whole universe. She wanted to see parks and green everywhere. She suggested all the dirty factories be removed from the planet, and that a great many museums of interplanetary art be erected in their place at once. And Astra also wanted the largest art academy in the whole empire built on her planet, where they could host artists from the whole galaxy and, with time, where her anointed son would learn to paint. And that was at the fact that the planet Uyak 4 was one of the swarm's main manufacturing centers, and the princess's innovative ideas threatened to shutter thousands of factories and other facilities that made high-tech products necessary to the swarm and the unitary state as a whole. I was expecting dire consequences after Astra's unpredictable speech and innovative ideas, but they never came. The 14 billion inhabitants of the planet Uyak 4 listened attentively to the speech of the new ruler of their star system, appreciated her care for them, and noted it with a whirlwind of relationship improvements from all swarm races. And that, essentially, was all that happened. As I later heard from Admiral Karace Vej, himself a native of Uyak 4, the White Queen, as Princess Astra was known in the swarm, had gained a firm reputation as a kind but eccentric and foolish companion of their ultimate ruler. Their job was to admire her, humor her idiosyncrasies, and protect her from her most foolhardy acts. Fulfilling her orders, though, was not even moderately necessary. So the Assaic were very skeptical of Princess Astra's announcements, and all the planet's factories were still in operation. As my cousin Katerina put it somewhat rudely, she tripped the idiot sensor. The Assaic were much more reasonable than we feared, and simply ignored her strange orders. Yes, Astra was not a great fit for the role of a serious, respected politician, but at that, my favorite was madly adored by the denizens of Unitari, both insect and human, Everywhere she went, she was greeted with ovations and great bouquets of flowers, and that stood in sharp contrast to my legal spouse, Maya, the Red Queen in swarm terminology, who was more respected and perhaps feared than loved. Come on, Jorg, that's enough. Do you think I like to hear comparisons like that? I just chuckled in reply to the Queen's annoyance. It was her own fault. She shouldn't have been reading my thoughts. She didn't have to get this upset. But I didn't have particular complaints about my wife. The Queen was not in conflict with my favorite, because she didn't take Astra even remotely seriously as a rival. Astra then, after quickly figuring out that the Queen of Unitari, despite her ghastly reputation, was not working to destroy her, accepted Maya more as a piece of furniture or yet another of the monarch's bodyguards. Insofar as I knew, the Queen and my favorite had a conversation 3 months ago, in which they had come to an understanding, laying down rules to help them coexist in peace. But I didn't really know the details. What do you even mean, details? My spouse cut into my thoughts, yet again. The princess was utterly oblivious to my hints, so I told Astra directly that she had to go straight to the medical wing of the starship to Senior Dr. Nikosid Brandt and get the very best in contraceptive. I assured the princess that she didn't have anything to fear from me, as long as she took the medicine he prescribed. And if she decides to break that rule, well... Because Maya didn't finish that sentence, I made sure to clarify the possible consequences Astra might face. Jorg, you know perfectly well that my arms and legs are bound by a promise I made to you, and that I cannot do any harm to your favorite. But that didn't necessarily mean she had to know that. Astra is still abusing her impunity and has basically moved into your cabin. If it weren't for her son, with whom Astra spends lots of time in the playroom, the princess would never leave your chambers. I walked over to the Queen of Unitari, who was looking cantankerously at her reflection in the mirror, and gave her a tender hug. Then, quietly, so Likana and Astra wouldn't hear me, I said, Maya, you shouldn't get upset. Astra has lived that way since her first day in my retinue, so she considers such behavior normal, and doesn't even suspect that it bothers you. My explanation was interrupted by an incoming call signal. The staff communications officer informed me. Your Majesty, incoming call from the throne world. The Dark Mother would like to speak with your second truth seeker, Floriana Tunvierde. Shall I put her through? It was a mere formality to ask such a question. Could one really refuse such a powerful truth seeker? So, of course, I gave my approval. After finishing her rejuvenation procedures, my spouse turned around. Alarm could be read on her now youthful and flawlessly beautiful face. I don't like this, Jorg. The Dark Mother has obviously got something in mind, and I don't trust her. For the last few weeks, I have had a growing sense of danger, and it has now become unbearably keen. Someday soon, something irreversible will happen. I had no reason to doubt the presentiments of such an experienced truth-seeker. To be honest, I had observed a strange lull in the political life of the Empire in the last few days, and didn't quite feel right about it myself. Normally, something happened every day. Aristocrats would fight and make up. Eternal alliances were formed and broken. Reports came in from the fronts where the fleets of the Purple and Blue Houses were holding back the alien onslaught with varying levels of success. But now, it was like the calm before the storm. I turned to the table, which my servants had just finished setting under the watchful eye of my butler, Bryle. I had lost all my appetite for breakfast, though. I just spoke to no one in particular, knowing that my order would be heard and handed off where it needed to go. We planned for there to be a conference of Unitari fleet commanders in 4 days to discuss the production timelines for the new ships. Explain to all those invited that the scheduled time has been changed, and I expect them in 40 minutes on Joan the Fatty. Maya, you'll be coming with me. As it happens, there's some work up your alley. I was in a small circular room on my flagship, built to hold secret negotiations and conferences. It was totally blacked off from the outside world. No recording devices would work here, and all implants would be deactivated. My android secretary, Bionica, turned off instantly in this room as well. So the translator in this conversation, which would involve humans and Asaic, was the head of my security team, the chameleon Papori Dakacha. I was normally accompanied by Flora, who checked the sincerity and loyalty of all those present, but today, my truth-seeker was Maya. This was the first time the Queen of Unitari had attended such a conference. She was engrossed in a huge touchscreen in the middle of the room, over which there hovered a huge glowing hologram of Imperial space, with all perimeter sectors. There were a great number of variously colored markers showing the position of all known fleets, including those of the Empire, great houses, allied kingdoms, and even aliens. Here you can find the most up-to-date information on the position of all combat starships we've infiltrated. Even the Imperial Joint Chiefs don't have such accurate data, I said, unable to avoid bragging to my wife. Maya didn't ask any questions, clearly reading all the information about my secret sources directly from my head. This tactical map was the true pride of the Unitari fleet. It was kept up to date by tens of thousands of modest androids who flew under the radar, working on military ships of the Empire and great houses as housekeepers, haulers, mechanics, or even pleasure bots for the crews of the combat starships. The number of android agents sympathetic to the Unitari cause had grown significantly. Bionica had long been swamped with all the encrypted data we were getting from our many agents. For that reason, 2 months ago, a special department of 20 robots was formed in my headquarters to receive the encrypted messages on service channels, check them for reliability, then place the data on the tactical map. As a rule, any messages about fleet movements were reaffirmed by dozens of independent sources, so any false information arriving to the headquarters would be immediately filtered out. But as far as I knew, we hadn't yet detected any unreliable information, which gave me hope that no one in the Empire had yet guessed about my secret network of android spies. An alternative source of information was the Arites, the very same diplomatic servants killed on the throne world, as well as 100 other shape-shifting secret agents flying around the Empire and embedding themselves in headquarters, fleets, and communication centers. It was still a mystery to me how the Arites could recognize one another and converse amongst themselves, as they were very reluctant to discuss this topic. But the fact remained. The most valuable information about the Empire's secret docks, where they were building giant supercarrier-class starships, had been received from the Arite Asaic. The Unitari state had plenty of normal spies as well. My authority in military circles was already high, but after the first successful counterattack against the aliens in history, the defeat of the terrifying fleet of the Alien Queen, and the liberation of nearly 30 star systems, the Imperial military's faction's opinion of Crown Prince Jorg had jumped to nearly plus 60. As far as I knew, that was the highest such number among all fleet leaders and aristocrats in the galaxy. I could make use of that, but didn't think it prudent to do so for simple data gathering. Floriana and Maya were quite good at exposing spies in my ranks, so it made sense to assume that the other side's truth-seekers would be capable of the same. The doors opened, and the members of my secret council entered the room one after the other. They were veterans of a great many battles, and experts in their fields, whose outstanding ability and loyalty I didn't doubt in the slightest. Sector 9 Fleet Commander Admiral Stefan Antri Mesfel. Sector 8 Fleet Commander Space Major Nicole Tonsavoya. 1st Unitari Fleet Commander Admiral Mike Tanakad. Second Unitary Fleet Commander, Admiral Kiro Sabuto. Virho Heavy Fleet Commander, the Alpha Assaic Admiral Mas Azaza. Aho Strike Fleet Commander, the Alpha Assaic Admiral Kure Svedge. Swarm Landing Operations Commander, Marshal Savas Jach. And my second cousin, Duchess Katerina Tan Unitari, my political advisor. I also had one new member, my Beta Assaic First Advisor, Apas Ugu. He scurried into the room last on his many little legs. He'd previously been an advisor to Queen Naya Gear. When I first met him, I was unable to believe my luck. The unique insect had a phenomenal intellect and memory, and knew absolutely everything about all swarm systems. Apasugu could instantly provide information on ships under construction at all my docks, how long they would take to finish, material reserves, and the necessary number of transports to sustain every garrison. Such valuable staff had to be taken care of, even on the massive scales of the swarm. Such genius was exceedingly rare. So, in one of my very first orders as rulers of the Assaic, I awarded my first advisor a blue stripe on his abdomen, which indicated absolute untouchability. And so, all the participants in today's private conference had arrived. I nodded at Papori to Katja, and the head of my guard ordered a subordinate to close the door and activate the electronic suppression system. I knew when the electromagnetic cocoon that enveloped the room had turned on because my electronic implant shut down. The only electronic device that did work in the room was the huge tactical screen, which had been designed with electric shielding for this very purpose. So then, let's begin, I said, walking over to the glowing hologram in the middle of the room. I don't think my wife Maya needs any introduction, because the topic of today's conference is extremely serious. The Queen of Unitari herself will be serving as truth seeker. Maya will make sure you all remain honest. She will also be blocking all mind reading until the end of the meeting. The council members started making a din. They didn't all like the idea of mind reading being blocked, but no firm objections followed, so I continued. I remind you of one more rule. Here we speak as frankly as possible, not afraid to hurt the others with our remarks or suggestions. The restrictions of laws or morals do not apply to those in this room. We consider all possibilities, regardless of the fact that some of them might not be met with approval in the outside world. So then, I want to give the first word to the Queen of Unitari, so she can share her thoughts and suspicions. Despite the spontaneity of the speech, Maya held herself excellently. I suspect that my spouse had been made to give speeches to the public a number of times in her long life. I already knew she'd attended special rhetoric courses, and that experience was a major help. Maya didn't speak very loud, but each of her words imprinted in my brain as the infallible truth, like a dogma, to which doubts did not apply. The Queen of the Unitari told us she sensed a growing threat with her truth-seeking abilities, and had even determined its source. The antagonists were ready to invade. The Empire knew about our age-old enemy's plans, and a collision of the two most powerful forces was already unavoidable. And it was not a question of the far or even middle-term future, but the very nearest days or even hours. No matter who got the upper hand in the squabble, the victor's plans did not make room for an independent unitary state. The Queen finished her speech with the following words. I don't see us in the future. None of those present. That means that, if no actions are taken, and things are left to go on autopilot, everyone in this room is doomed, even me. We have a year and a half at most. To be honest, the truth seeker's words left me with a ghastly feeling. That sense of alarm was shared between all participants. I directly felt the tightening grip of the future she described. When the Queen finished,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?